Hi, I thought I would just do a quick video of me reading this really effective descriptive writing and then go through with you the annotations I've made, which explain why it achieves so well and so highly on the mark scheme. So, amongst narrow streets nestled between ancient stone walls, the marketplace sprawled outward from the city centre, the hordes of people rising and swelling rhythmically like the blood through a choked artery. Indeed, this was the beating heart of the city, grown fat from many years of sloth and glut. So we can see straight away this is based on a market scene. It's the market scene image that you've all seen. There's a really effective sense of place and setting established. The vocabulary that is used is effective, well chosen. And we've got this idea of prepositions being used to sort of position us. And then this sentence right at the end of this first paragraph is really brilliant because it's metaphorical. So the market is the beating heart, and the market has grown fat from many years of sloth and glut, and gluttony and sloth are two of the 7 deadly sins. So you've got straight away that conceptualized idea at play, which is what you need for that top band. The chatter of thousands wafted through the heavy air, which rose like a rich vapour around the lights that sprawled across many stalls. Side alleys stood in shadow, with generations of men huddled at their corners speaking on low tongues. Their own shadows cast long, wavering figures across the earthen ground, dancing between the flickering lights and treading softly across the wide plains of ripe harvest. This is an example of lingering. So if you've been on the Instagram stories or reels, you'll be able to see that I've added a tip from the examiners where we've sort of established the main scene and then moved on to a description, a sort of a wide description of the market stalls and the vendors. And rather than just saying, oh, there are stalls with vendors, it's lingered like the butterfly. It hovers over and just gives us the description of the alleys and the shadows and just goes into a bit more detail. Those small details are then added to, which is where we get this sort of fluidity and a really good sequence of events. So it shifts then from the sort of the sound, the shadows, the earth, to then small children, and we sort of zoom in. So small children squatted dirtily amongst the carts and scaffolding, spindly balls of thin limbs indulged with whoops and cries and open laughs and quick hands. Again, it's those descriptions. Rather than saying the children laughed and shouted, it's describing them. So it's saying that the children have got whoops and cries rather than they are just making loads of noise. And then we get a really effective structural shift here to storekeepers. So storekeepers watched on warily. So we've gone from big to a little bit smaller to something very specific, and then even more specific with the storekeepers. And what's fluid and sequenced about this is that we've started big, we're now focusing on the storekeepers, and they're linked. They're watching the children because they're clearly going to be worried about the children maybe causing mischief. So that variation in paragraph length as well, and sentence length, also then enhances the technical accuracy mark that this candidate would have been given. So really nice range of descriptions here already, but as you can see, it's an extended piece, and you really do need to go into a lot of detail if you want those top marks. We get more lingering then in these sort of in the middle section of the description and then towards the end. So structurally, again, it's excellent because it starts wider, zooms in, zooms in, zooms in, and now is going to start lingering again and giving us a lot of detail. For this was their harvest, their toil. One stood distraught, crowing loudly down his long nose as these mongrel hordes of plagued children galloped across the scorched earth, fording glowing rivers of honey and wine under forests of mangoes and bananas and orange hanging from branches of timber in small bags. Juxtaposition of the short sentence compared to the long detailed sentences. The sequence of images again is linked because we've gone from small children to the worry of the storekeepers to then the reason why the storekeepers are worried about the children. Now we've employed some real dialogue and some really effective dialogue which really brings the scene to life. "Stay away from my stall," he cried. "Go and play somewhere else. This costs money, you know." How much money? The dialogue here is exactly what I said in the previous video. It enhances the character because we've got this example of phonetic spelling. So the U is spelt how we would expect the voice to say it, you, and the dis. So just something subtle like that can take your mark up again because you're being subtle with your details, and you're using your characterization to really bring those characters and those descriptions to life. That was the question on everyone's lips. Buyers and sellers alike wrestled and cooed and bartered and teased in a strange dance, twisting and twirling each other's words until they landed begrudgingly on the underwhelming middle ground. Neither side ever won, yet each vowed to next time across playful smiles and warm handshakes. What's really nice here is rather than just being quite basic and quite generic and saying, the storekeeper exchanged dialogue with a buyer, and one said they wanted one price and one said they wanted the other. They've described it, so they've used sort of what we already know about what happens at a market, and then built on that and described it rather than just told us what's happening. We then get another shift to another small detail. Yet one man came with no money at all. He sat on an upturned crate in the dead end of a side street, gazing distantly with a wry smile of what unfolded before him. What this candidate has done, and which is another tip from AQA, is think of it like a film. So if you think of how this is playing out, we're focusing on the storekeeper. Now we've got an image of the storekeeper plus a buyer, and now he's sort of panned round to another part of the market. So we've got that prepositional phrase to show us that we're now at a side street. We've got an old man, we've got a change in sort of focus. So it's like the camera's panned round and focused on something else, which is really clever. And again, not too hard to do. So if you focus on one thing and then move your reader round to focus on something else, that is showing a really good fluidity to the sequence of ideas. We then get your sort of more typical description in this paragraph with the senses. The rich aromas of home-cooked sweets, the sizzle of the oil as a street vendor fried away over cast-iron pots, the gentle swing of the soft silk sheets that hung from ceilings of rough canvas patchwork. Really nice use of alliteration or sibilance here, to create that the lovely sort of soft sound that silk and sheets evoke. The young boy stood on a table shouting prices to the crowd. Hey uncle, hey auntie, have I got a price for you? Again, effective use of characterisation. And yelling, sort of shouting as well, showing us how they're doing it, how they're saying it. Below, his even younger brother went about his work with nimble fingers and swift hands that plucked ripe fruit from their baskets with frightening speed and money from outstretched hands at a terrifying pace. Although we've not got characters in the sense of a story, we've had so far general children, storekeepers. We've then had a specific storekeeper. We've had a man. We've now had two young boys. So again, the detail is excellent. We're nearly done. In the corner, another example of spatial deixis. That's an A-level term, but spatial just means anything to do with space. So positioning. In the corner, butchers carved hunks of meat hung up from carcasses as their blood dripped into the soil below. For that was the magic of the market, the warm blood mingling with the rough, cold earth as the chatter rose and night fell on a cold street in India. And then very, very cleverly, we get this really effective conclusion to this description. So links this paragraph to this paragraph because we're talking about the blood dripping from the carcass. We bring it back to the rough, cold earth, which we had in the first paragraph. And then it brings us sort of back out to that wider image that this is a street in India. So that juxtaposition is really slight, but very clever. I've put here at the end, it's descriptive at its core, even though it moves to night. It doesn't tell the story of the day into the night. So it is a description, but it is brought to life. So just like I suggested on this tutor video, if you hold that live video, it brings the scene to life for a few seconds, and that's what it feels like we've had here. It's focused, it's original, it's not just doing your normal market scene. It's got a lot of subtle details. It's evocative in its imagery. I can actually imagine, smell, and visualize and see all the fruits and the meats and the people in this scene, and that the structure is just really effective and fluid. I feel like I'm in this market and I'm taken and guided through it, which I think is fantastic. So hopefully that's nice and clear for you, and that's a really good example of a top mark descriptive writing example.